What's good, TristonTalks family? Today, I wanted to mention a few things before I got into the actual topic here. I've been looking at the No Kings protests around the nation, and I've been seeing a lot of socialists and a lot of comrades say they're not going to participate because they think it's a state-sanctioned protest and you're doing it on a weekend when a protest was meant to disturb or disrupt or stop the flow of something, right? Nobody, like, the rhetoric is like nobody's outside on a weekend, nobody's going to work on a weekend like that. Um, my take is that in a socialist point of view, in this democracy, to uphold democratic values, you must still participate in these protests. You cannot be too revolutionary or too woke or too or too out of their league because you call yourself the leftist and there are liberals to not participate in this living democracy. I mean, me personally, I couldn't participate in it because I was not aware that it was happening in my city. But that's me. That's on me. But I fuck with the cause. I'm down with the cause, and I'm I am skeptical of some things of like how we're getting our point across, and if we're doing this for mobilization instead of organization. But the main point is that these people are actually doing something. Good people uphold democracy. Communists and leftists are good people. They're supposed to be good people. If you want to live and if you want to change this order in which we live in which we will talk about today, from we will talk about from neoliberalism to neo-fascism. But if we want to not go into this fascist, this neo-fascist type of government, which we already are in, we have to constantly uphold democratic values. I know you guys have read Rosa Luxemburg, but you have to uphold democratic values. No matter, I don't care if you're so revolutionary that you don't even side with these people. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Even if you don't agree with the protest, still go and try to get some type of point across to liberals. You know, try to put in some little socialist hints or some, say something, you know, get a crowd, you know, get somebody thinking, you know, even if you don't agree with the aspect of it, you can change someone's mind of how we're doing this protest and how it should be conducted, or even how they see the world. You feel me? It should have been an opportunity to meet some people, even though we are protesting. I mean, everyone knows this is not going to go away today, but meet some people, gain some connections, and see what happens from there. Because freedom is a constant struggle, and we've struggled for so long. We ought to be free, but we can't be free if you don't want to work for it. But that's my take on the protest. No King's protest. I absolutely support them. I've been to the few in my time here in college, and I absolutely do support them. I've been to a lot of marches when they took away our polling site in Greensboro. I've been to the organizing meetings. I've been to this stuff, and I know these people. The revolution is happening. That's what I think. I think the revolution is here. It may not seem like it because we're all on the internet and you think nothing's happening on the internet, but people in the community are actually doing something to change the world they live in. Because you have to think globally and act locally. Because here in Greensboro, I feel like we're revolutionized. We're conscious. We have clarity. We know what's going on. People are changing the system as we speak. There are people writing stuff down. There's people like me on this screen telling you about stuff, philosophizing, and that's why I call myself philosopher of the revolution. Not everybody needs to be on the front lines. You need the thinkers. You need the writers. You need the people who play music. You need the artists. You need the musicians. You need all this. Because the revolution is not about hate or violence. The revolution is about love. At the end of the day, it's about love. It's about art. It's about family. It's about community. That's what we have. And we have that revolution here. I feel like it's here. You just have to step outside. No shade. You just have to step outside. And I think if if you start actually talking to people, actual people, instead of arguing on the internet like we do, and I do this too. I argue on the internet all the time, but I don't feel hopeful at the end of it. I mean, I don't feel lost or in despair at the end of it, or think that we're too far gone. I always have some type of hope because I know that what we're fighting for is not for us. It's not for me. It's for the future generations, so they can live the way they want to live and how we saw it. If in the civil rights and they didn't sit down, if Rosa Parks didn't sit down in the front of the bus, if Martin Luther King didn't go to jail, if Malcolm X didn't do all this stuff for us, Fred Hampton, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, if they didn't do all this stuff for us, we would still be not able to vote. We would still be segregated restaurants and schools and all this stuff. So what we're doing right now, like me talking on this computer, or people in the streets, people reading, writing, it's not for us. It's not for me. It's for our kids. It's for their grandkids. It's for our grandkids. But that's all I got. But today we're going to be talking about from neoliberalism to neo-fascism. And this question has been coming up very often with political scientists and activists and everyday people. I mean, I see it. I mean, when I talk to people, we talk about this stuff. But they think we got fascism out of nowhere. Fascism came out of liberalism, neoliberalism. And I'm going to tell you how we got there. So we are in a society that we call a liberal democracy, right? Built on markets, free trades, and individual rights. To one that starts looking, sounding, and acting fascist. But it doesn't happen overnight, nor does it happen by accident. It doesn't happen because one bad person got elected. It happened because a system breaks down, and when a system breaks down and offers people nothing, they go looking for something, anything, that at least acknowledges their pain, right? This is the road from neoliberalism to neo-fascism, and we're gonna walk through it step by step. But first, we have to recognize what is neoliberalism and where did it come from. We all know Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, two evil peas in a pod, but we're actually gonna break it down. Neoliberalism is not just capitalism. It's a specific version of capitalism, and that took over the globe in the late 1970s and the 1980s. The core idea is that deregulate the market and privatize public goods, and cut government spending on social programs, and let the so-called free market sort everything out. You know the names, as I said before, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. The theory was that if you freed up capital and if you let wealth accumulate at the top, it would trickle down to everyone else. Obviously, it didn't. But what it did was it financialized everything. It turned housing into an investment vehicle. It turned education into a debt instrument. And it turned healthcare into a profit center. And it turned labor and human beings and the work they do into a commodity to be bought at the lowest possible price. Karl Marx said something about this. He diagnosed communism is with no iPhone. No, I'm sorry. I got off of it. Karl Marx did mention this. He said something in his book Capital. He wrote that under capitalist production, the worker becomes an ever cheaper commodity. The more commodity he creates. The worker produces wealth, right? But that wealth does not return to him. It flows upward. It becomes alienated from the very person who made it. Marx calls this alienation. The condition where your own labor becomes a force that stands against you, a power that belongs to someone else. Neoliberalism didn't invent this dynamic. It perfected it. It made alienation global. It made it structural, and it made it invisible. They wrapped it in the language of freedom and individual choice so that people who were being crushed by the system would blame themselves instead of the system. Don't mind I get my clothes from the thrift, so that's probably why there's a hole in there. Chapter 2 is the next thing I'm going to talk about is that neoliberalism promised that if you work hard, play by the rules, and compete, you can succeed, right? The market is neutral and the market is fair. Everyone has a shot. This promise was true for, yes, the majority, but it was not true for the minorities. They knew historically that the market was never neutral. Minorities knew that the rules were never fair, and that shot you were getting defended by Kawhi Leonard, while others were getting defended by Stephen Curry, because he doesn't play defense. No shade on Stephen Curry. There was history of redlining, of wage theft, and wealth extraction from black communities, and it told a different story than the neoliberal brochure. But for a time, particularly in the post-war era and through Clinton and Obama years, the professional class, the educated middle class, bought into it. These things felt stable. They felt like progress, and at least on the surface. Philosopher and activist Cornel West identified exactly what this looked like from the inside in a 2020 interview with Jacobin. West described how neoliberalism produced, in his own words, a system where everybody for sale, everything for sale, a market-driven culture of celebrities, status, power, and fame that couldn't deliver real nourishment for the soul, for meaning, for purpose. He described watching neoliberal wing of the Democratic Party offer Black America as symbolic decorative changes, more black faces in high places, right? While the underlying conditions of poor and working class people went unaddressed. But the Black Lives Matter movement, West noted, emerged under a black president, a black attorney general, and a black secretary of Homeland Security. And still the killings continued. Still the poverty continued. Still the incarceration continued. And that told you something critical about the limits of neoliberal representation, that putting familiar faces on an unfair system does not change said system. Rosa Luxemburg also wrote on this over a century earlier than Cornel West was talking about it. She had already predicted this failure in Reform or Revolution. She argued that those who choose legislative reform over structural transformation do not really choose a more tranquil, calmer, or slower road to the goal, but a different goal. The goal of reform within capitalism, she said, is not the liberation of working people. It is the reform of capitalism, the smoothing of its edges while leaving its foundation intact. This is precisely what neoliberal governance offered. Edged, polished, diversity-branded capitalism, and it ran out of gas. It was gone. But what happens when the system breaks? By 2008, the contradictions that neoliberalism had been papering over for decades exploded. The financial crisis wiped out 13 million in household wealth. Millions lost their homes, right? Pension funds evaporated. Entire communities hollowed by deindustrialization and offshoring of manufacturing jobs. It collapsed, right? And what did the neoliberal government do? It bailed out the banks. It rescued Wall Street with public money and then told the public that there was no money for them. Marx wrote in Capital that capitalist crises are not accidents. They're internal to the system itself. I described how capital, in its drive to extract maximum profit, constantly undermines the condition that allows it to keep functioning. The system produces its own crisis. In those crises, the mask comes off. After 2008, the mask came off. And what people saw underneath was that a system had been running for a benefit of a very small number of people, and that the politicians of both parties had been managing that reality, not challenging it. Cornel West described the moment with brutal clarity in his Jacobin interview. The neoliberal order from Goldman Sachs to the institutional Democratic Party tried to hold things together through Obama and then Biden, and when it became clear that the left could not provide a credible alternative vision or program, those same elites began looking elsewhere. As West puts it, there is really no American neo-fascism without the failure of American neoliberalism. That was a soil they had invested in themselves. Neo-fascism grows in that soil that neoliberalism exhausted. So this is where we get into neo-fascism, how your grievance and how grievance becomes a weapon. When the people are suffering and the left cannot offer a coherent alternative, something fills the vacuum. And what fills it is usually not a movement for greater equality. It is a movement that redirects the anger, that takes legitimate grievances and weaponizes it against the most vulnerable. Cornel West describes Trump's political program in his precise terms. It was based very much on xenophobia, which is the hatred of foreign peoples, and the support of the military and the embrace of Wall Street, but also in the contempt of neoliberals. This is a key move of neo-fascism, right? It does not challenge the economic structure that's crushing people. It challenges the rage that of the crushed, right? Toward immigrants, toward black people, toward LGBTQ communities, toward academics, toward the press, toward anyone who can be cast as the enemy within. This is not a new playbook. And the crises of German social democracy, also known as the Junius pamphlet, written by Rosa Luxemburg and from prison in 1915, she quoted Friedrich Engels, who had warned that bourgeoisie society stands at a crossroad. Either transition to socialism or regression into barbarism. Luxemburg looked at the carnage of World War I and said that the regression into barbarism was not a metaphor, it was a material reality. Civilization left to the logic of capital without a counterforce. This does not progress, it decays, it turns violent, and it finds scapegoats. What we see in a neo-fascism is not the rejection of capitalism, it is capitalism in crisis, defending itself through authoritarian means. The ruling class or a faction of it makes a calculated decision, rather than concede to the demands of the working people. We will divide the working people, okay? We will give the white working class a story about who their enemy is, and we will make a cruelty policy. And we will make empathy a weakness. Y'all see what I'm saying here? This shit is not an accident. It's structured, it's planned. All of this is planned. This is called neo-fascism, and it has at least a wholesale permission for greed and hatred and contempt, and it has made empathy a foe. Okay, so like the movements that rise out of neo-fascism, such as the Black Lives Matter movement or labor organizing or student movements, faced two threats simultaneously. One was a repression, and the other was co-optation, right? Repression is obvious. Police surveillance, prosecution. Cornel West pointed out COINTELPRO, the FBI's systematic destruction of the Black Freedom Movement in the 1960s, was not an aberration. It was the neo-fascist policy of the liberal state. Excuse me. America has a documented history of killing and surveilling and dismantling movements and pose a genuine threat to the system while simultaneously upholding freedom. Co-optation is subtler and arguably more dangerous. It's described this way, like the Black Freedom Movement has always been confronted with the fundamental challenge of being co-opted by the status quo with big money, and big status and big position. The movement for Black Lives was met with corporate donations, DEI initiatives, and marketing campaigns and political gestures, all designed to absorb its energy and redirect into forms that the system could tolerate, right? Like a kente cloth movement, a tweet, or a hashtag adopted by the same institutions that fund the police. Rosa Luxemburg saw this dynamic clearly in her own time. She argued that working within the system and accepting its terms, its frameworks and channels, does not reform the system. It becomes the system. The struggle for reforms can only remain vital, she wrote, when it is animated by the revolutionary goal. When it loses that goal, when it becomes an end in itself. This is what she calls the suppression of the abuses of capitalism instead of the suppression of capitalism itself. This is a trap every movement faces, and it's a trap that requires constant political clarity to avoid. So what do we do with all this? Where does this leave us? The answer is not a return to neoliberalism. The answer is to not rehab the system that built the soil for fascism. The answer is not despair. It is what he calls a non-violent revolution. A genuine rethinking of who the economy serves, who politics serves, and whose suffering gets counted. Marx argued in Capital that the contradictions of capitalism do not resolve themselves. They sharpen and the crises get bigger. The wealth concentrates further and the political system becomes less and less capable of mediating between the interest of capital and the needs of the people. This is not a prediction of doom. It is a description of a dynamic that creates the conditions over and over for people to recognize that the status quo is not working and to organize for something different. Rosa Luxemburg also said, writing at a moment when the world was at a war and left had largely failed and still refused pessimism. She wrote, before a revolution happens, it is perceived as impossible. After it happens, it is seen as being inevitable. The impossible keeps becoming the inevitable. This is the through line through history. But nothing comes without organization. Nothing comes without clarity about who the enemy actually is. And it is not the immigrant. It is not the person who looks different from you. It is not the trans kids in your community. It is the concentration of power that has decided your life is less important than their profit margin. And the road out of neo-fascism does not run through neoliberalism. It runs through something that both major parties in this country have constantly refused to build, a genuine politics of solidarity that addresses the material conditions of working and poor people across race, across region, across difference. Solidarity, the only thing that has ever worked. It is the only thing the powerful have always feared the most. But that's it. Appreciate y'all listening. Peace.